Hello and welcome back to Rev Endurance Sports and episode 5 in the series of what I've called Power Meters for Dummies playlist. And basically it's for people who either have just purchased a power meter from me or have been riding with power but just don't really understand what they're looking for and how to use it. So in this video, we're going to talk about what functional threshold power is, why it's important, and how to find it. So let's begin with what it is. Functional threshold power, FTP, and you've probably heard this term before. This is the maximum average power you can sustain for 1 hour. Theoretically, you can ride for 1 hour at this power, and that's it, right? So there are a couple of ways to find it, and we're going to talk about that. But why is it important? It's important because you can set up your training zones based on it. So you can set your power training zones. You have your heart rate zones, but you can also have training zones. Power meter wattage zones based on that threshold power. Same kind of percentage that you may do, like a 80% of FTP, or there are already in some of the software programs, there are like an Andy Coogan model and some other models, right? And so they'll break it up into like 7 zones, right? And the reason it's important is because this way you can train to those zones accurately. So if you don't know what your maximum power is, and how do you know what 80% of that is and 70% and so on and so forth, right? So that's for training. But then it's also important because if you're out riding, that's like that's like your red line, right? So if you're riding along and you know your functional threshold power, your FTP is just a number, 250 watts, then if you're riding along at 270, you're not going to last an hour doing that. Or maybe you're just having a ridiculously great day, and guess what? You've got a new FTP now, right? So that could happen too. And that's important to note, that FTP is not a static thing. It's not fire and forget. It's not something you put into your cycling computer one time and leave it alone. Because as your fitness increases and as you do certain workouts, your FTP could increase and it could also decrease. So you need to maintain that number inside your cycling computer and or your power analysis software that you may be using, a third party like Training Peaks, which is what I use for my own personal stuff and for when I coach folks. Okay, how do you find it? Well, there are a few options, and the most painful of them is to go ride really, really hard for 1 hour. And then that would be your threshold, your FTP, right? But most people can't ride for 1 hour unless it's on a climb and, there's just no interruptions in any way. No stop signs, nothing. So the most common and most popular is a 20-minute test, and go out as hard as you can for 20 minutes. And they say that 95% of that number is your FTP. Now, I've always had issues with that. They say 95%. I tend to think it's more like 85% because I just don't think that what you did for 20 minutes is going to translate to anything you could do for an hour. You can ride much harder for 20 minutes and it only be 5% different than what you would do for an hour. So I've never subscribed to that theory. And then the last way to do it is just a ramp test. So you could go sit on your trainer, and then in the first few, you continue to increase the wattage. So you can start off with like 10 watts, a minute later, another 10 watts, and so on and so forth, until you get to a point where, it's starting to get hard. So then you maybe increase only by 5 watts, and then you'll get a number there. I'm not a huge fan of ramp test, but you can use it. And I believe Zwift and other virtual training software has a ramp test in it, or you could probably find one. But, you know, if you follow me on Strava, you know, my taglines are fueled by REV Energy, because of course I am fueled by it, but it also says all outside miles. So even if I do a trainer session, I won't upload it into my stuff. So get out, ride your bike, right? Okay, so let's go over this again. What it is, it's the maximum effort you can, maximum average power you can hold for 1 hour. Why it's important? Because, well, you can train to it, and you could also, for pacing purposes, you know, if you know your FTP is 250, then ride under that. Or if you want to if you want to do intervals to increase your VO2 max, then train over your FTP, shorter duration intervals. Let's say your FTP is 250, you do them at 275 for 5 minutes, right? So you have to know something. And then all of these analytical, all the metrics, all the data is derived off that FTP. So we're going to get into TSS, training stress score, later, but that's important. And you could look at your FTP and TSS. And so, but all of those metrics are driven by that FTP number. So if you don't have that number accurate, it might throw off all your other metrics. So it is important to just put something in there. And your Garmin sometimes, or I don't know what Wahoo does these days, but your Garmin will tell you you've reached a new FTP or you've reached a new lactate threshold. So then just update your data. Okay. All right. Well, that's all for today, because I'm trying to keep these really, really short, educational. And if you find value in these videos, please like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell. Literally 76 to 77% of the folks watching my videos are not subscribed. So please subscribe if you're getting value out of these videos. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time and your attention, and we'll see you up the road.